most in business. Today, I am pleased to welcome the original James Bond. He's one of America's leading marketing and behavioral management specialists. He's also the author of the book Brain Glue, How to Sell Easier by Making Your Ideas Sticky. I always wanted to say this. James Bond, welcome to Behind the Numbers.
Oh, Dave, thank you for having me. I love your podcast. It rocks. So to be on it is just awesome.
Appreciate the kind words, my friend. And I know you get that a lot with the whole James Bond play thing, but I just couldn't help myself. So why don't you tell the audience a little bit about who you are, the real original James Bond?
Well, I was born after the books and before the movies. So, but I think having the name James Bond is what got me into Brain Glue, this concept. And that is, I remember there's a church near where we live. My wife and I are going for a walk, and there's the guy who who works at the church, and him and his wife, and they're looking at me, and he says, "So hi, my name is Fred, and this is Mary. What's your name?" And I said, "I'm James, and this is my wife Pam." And then I paused, and then I said, "Actually, my name is James Bond." And he looks at me and they start laughing. But I realized that they will remember my name for the next 10 years. I could walk through this area and they'll look at me and they'll remember that I'm James Bond because it's a trigger word. I mean, I accidentally got that. I think my parents had a sense of humor. But yeah, it's just amazing, but it helped me to understand that there are certain things that we say or do that trigger the brain and make people understand, make people remember it. It sticks to the brain like glue. And as I started learning this, I used to have an advertising agency. I'm originally from Montreal, but now I work in Southern California. I live in Southern California. I've lived here for 37 years. But when I was in Montreal, I ran an advertising agency, and I worked my way up and eventually won major clients like Kraft Foods, Timex Watches, Abbott Laboratories, Seagram's, their world headquarters is there. And I had an opportunity to win the anti-drug campaign in America. Do you remember the anti-drug campaign in America?
I sure do. Yeah. Tell the audience because they may not.
Okay. So first I was competing with, and I lost. Okay. I came up with powerful logical reasons why you should not do drugs. And then I saw what beat us, and it terrified me. And it was a guy holding an egg saying, "This is your brain." Then crack the shell and drop the egg into a sizzling frying pan. Yeah. This is your brain on drugs. Any questions? When I saw that ad, two things happened. The first one was I recognized this was infinitely more powerful than anything I knew how to do. But the second thing was I realized this is emotional selling, not logic, but emotional selling. And emotional selling was infinitely more powerful than logic, but I had no idea how to do emotional selling. And it terrified me. And so I did research and I realized, nobody really teaches how to do emotional selling. So I came up with this crazy idea. I said, I'm going to put a box next to my computer. I'm going to call it the passion box. And every time I see an ad or hear something that's emotional selling, could be a quote that a famous person says that's really emotional, rather than trying to overanalyze it because I don't really know how emotional selling works, I'm going to write it on a 3x5 card, like Your Brain on Drugs I wrote on a 3x5 card, or I'm going to tear it out of a magazine and I'm going to put it in my passion box in the hopes that eventually I'll have enough examples that I could figure out how to do emotional selling myself. After about 10 years, I was in Montreal originally. We moved to Southern California, and I met John Gray. And John Gray was telling me about frustration he had. He had written an incredible book called Men, Women, and Relationships. And people who read the book loved his book. They said, this is one of the most incredible relationship books I've ever read. But almost nobody was buying his book. And so he got this crazy idea. What if I change the title to Men Are From Mars, Women Are From Venus? and then put references to it throughout the book, but basically keep the same book. What do you think happened? He was telling me it's amazing. Like almost overnight, 500,000 copies got sold, and 1 million and 2 million. He eventually sold 50 million copies of Men Are From Mars, Women Are From Venus. 50 million copies. Can you imagine? He went from 20,000 to 50 million copies just because he changed the title? When I got home, I was going to put the Men Are From Mars, Women Are From Venus book. I had a copy of the book in my passion box. And then I stopped and I realized, wait a second, this is a metaphor. Men aren't really from a different planet. I think a lot of women think we're from a different planet. We act that way sometimes.
Absolutely.
Yeah. But this is a metaphor. He's basically saying men are so different than women sometimes that it's almost like we're from a different planet. Okay. Men are from Mars, women are from Venus. And so I realized the guy holding the egg, he wasn't holding a brain. He was holding an egg. And he said, this is your brain and this is your brain on drugs. That's a metaphor too. They're probably sitting around a table and they said, so when somebody takes drugs, what happens? It fries your brain. Okay. What else gets fried? Eggs. Let's have an egg and say, this is your brain on drugs, and drop it into a sizzling frying pan. So I started getting excited and I said, did I just figure out how emotional selling works? That it's about metaphors? And so I took the passion box and I dumped it on my bed to validate it, to see if that's what it is. But I realized metaphors is one of 14 brain triggers at the heart of emotional selling. I thought my brain was going to explode. It's like, if I just figured out something that nobody else has figured out. And so I was working with, I work as a consultant, so I get to practice on clients. And so the first client I worked with was three guys in a construction company who after 10 years had $2 million of sales. Not bad, right? $2 million of sales? Ha ha. I mean, I'm saying that not, I'm not being pompous about it. I was just like floored. In 1 year, I took them from 2 million to 10 million in sales by applying brain glue, and they reached 32 million 2 years later. And then I freaked out. It's like, this works more than I ever thought.
All right, we got to unpack this because that's a great preamble here. But
okay,
let me start by asking you, why is emotion such a critical component in selling?
We buy for emotion.
Resonate more than the logical stuff that you refer to.
So most of us are logical people. I want to start there. Okay, I mean, when you're in business, you create a product or service, you're usually solving a problem, and we're very logical. But the problem is that people buy for emotional reasons. It triggers the emotion centers of the brain, and the decision centers of the brain and the emotion centers of the brain are all connected. So, I mean, in marketing, we have this term that we say you want people to know, like, and trust you. That's emotion. If somebody doesn't like you, they're probably not going to buy from you, even if you have a good product or service. And so we recognize, even though indirectly we recognize this, that we want to sell emotionally. We want people to emotionally connect with us. Well, marketing terms follow the same pattern. In fact, the tool, there are psychological reasons why. I've worked with a neuroplastic, people with things that talk about how to change the brain and everything. And I talk about brain glue, and they're floored by how powerful this is and how this works. But yeah, so I used to hate selling when I was young. Today I teach it, and brain glue focuses on how to sell your products, your services, public speaking. Public speakers use brain glue tools all the time, and I'll give you some examples of that in a second. But Zig Ziglar had a really fantastic line. I did his workshops when I was younger with my wife, and he said, "Selling is nothing more than a transference of passion." And it's true. If you're passionate about something, if I saw a movie I love, if you saw a movie you love, nobody has to teach you how to sell it. You're going to say, oh, this movie is so great. Da, 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 da. And it's just because we have passion, we're sending the passion to somebody else and we're connecting with it. But we're taught in school, I was taught in school to be logical, list the features and the benefits,
Right.
All the logic of it. But the benefits part, to a degree, is passion, but it's not as much as if you're taking some brain glue tools, okay? There are actual tools. I mean, I remember this. Probably everybody remembers this, is Jack and Jill went up the hill, okay? I mean, I could be on my deathbed and someone could say, Jack and Jill went up, then I go, hill to fetch a pail of water. Well, rhyme is one of the brain glue tools, but there are many tools, okay? When we hear rhyme, we tend to remember it like it was, Jack and Jill went up the hill. I heard that like 50 or 60 years ago. I'm pretty old, okay? What can I say? And yet on my deathbed, I'd still remember it because it sticks to the brain like glue. And so rhyme is one of the powerful tools. So let me give you an example of how brain glue applies, okay?
Please do, yeah.
So first, let me give you some, it works in persuasion too. So I'll give you some persuasion tools. O.J. Simpson was on trial for murder. And his attorney, Johnny Cochran, right at the end of the trial, he turned to the jury and he said, if the glove doesn't fit, you have to acquit. And two of the jurors, after the trial, were being interviewed by a journalist. And a journalist said, with all that evidence against OJ, why do you find him not guilty? And one of the jurors responded while the other one nodded her head in agreement. And she said, well, we knew if the glove don't fit, you have to acquit. The glove didn't fit. We had to acquit. Yeah. Okay. Sticks to the brain like glue. Malcolm X, President John F. Kennedy said, ask not what your country can do for you, ask what you can do for your country. That's something called chiasmus, which is kind of a flip. It's like all for one and one for all. Okay, I mean, there's a joke that goes, I'd rather wake up and pee than pee and wake up.
Yeah.
That's, also older guys can relate to that one. But so when you understand these patterns, you can start applying it to products. And so there's a mom and son in Utah who are watching Shark Tank, and they love Shark Tank. But they have almost no business experience. So they're thinking, wouldn't it be great if we can invent a product and be successful enough that we can get on Shark Tank and then maybe become massive millionaires because of that? And so they're thinking that would be really great. So it took a while for them to figure out the product they wanted to sell. It took about a month. And mom was constipated. And so when she went to the bathroom, she had trouble. And so a doctor told her, when you're on the toilet, if you could raise your feet 6 to 8 inches off the floor, it could really help because it changes the shape of your body. She tried it and it worked. And wow, so they came up with the idea, wouldn't it be great if we can create this little toilet stool that fits around the toilet, and when you're on the toilet, you can slide it out and put your feet on it? Oh, wow, that would be great. And so they found a manufacturer to manufacture it for about $4 or $5 each because it's just plastic. And they figured they could sell it for $20, $19.95. Wow, this would really be great. But we need a good name for it. And so they're thinking, and they said, well, it's a toilet stool. And you always start with logic, okay? So the logical description of it is it's a toilet stool. But they're going, that's a terrible name, toilet stool. What's another word for toilet? Potty. And you're kind of squatting. Squatty potty. Let's call it the squatty potty. Sales exploded. They reached $100 million of sales. This is two people with no business experience.
I remember the episode vividly. Yeah, I'm a big fan of Shark Tank. Being in the valuation space, it kind of made what I do sexy, as I like to say.
So I had a heart operation 2 months ago. Heart, and not fun, okay? But I was sitting and talking to a nurse, and she said, what do you do? And I said, well, I wrote a book called Brain Glue, and I was telling her this story about the squatty potty. And she said, I got to tell you this. She said, I am a nurse, and I know you're supposed to raise your feet off the ground. And I had this little thing that this little stool that I put on my feet. But I was in a store, and I saw Squatty Potty, and I said, oh, I got to buy it. And I bought it because I love the name. And I was like, really? You bought it because you love the name, even though you already have a little stool? She said, yeah. It was so cool. I thought it was great. It triggers the emotion side of the brain. And so she saw Squatty Potty, she started laughing, and she ended up buying it. I mean, it's just when we start to understand the power of emotional triggers, it blows our mind, but it also generates income that's like unexpectedly amazing.
Yeah. Hey, let me ask you, James, would you mind workshopping something with me here in real time?
Sure.
So here's what I'm thinking. So when you talk about the technical fields, right? So legal, accounting, they're kind of boring, right? They're things that people need. You're not like actively looking per se. There's another circumstance generally that drives you to look for an accountant or a lawyer, and oftentimes they're not happy things, pleasant things. And I know a bunch of accountants and attorneys. Some of them are some of my best friends, and they sell with the logic piece. It's the features and benefits, and they've been trained. Okay, let's do the benefits first, so that you're making it about the customer. But at the end of the day, if we're all doing our jobs correctly as a provider of professional services, it's virtually impossible for a customer to discern a real difference. So they default to things like price. Or maybe if you're lucky, they'll default to fit and personality and realize that maybe someone is a better fit to work with than others. So the question then for you is, if you're working with somebody who's in one of those technical professions that oftentimes are also perceived as commodities, how do they take that and make an emotional sale?
So I want to say there are two pieces to this, okay? The first one is name or slogan. I mean, your name is Dave Bookbinder. People, you can't forget that, okay? But it also, a bookbinder, we know what that is. That's somebody who is, capable, And so the name can be tremendously valuable. But there's another piece, and that you hit on an issue that affects a lot of people. So somebody says, tell them your price. Numbers turn off the emotion centers of the brain. So we're talking to somebody that say, oh, that's really good. Okay, so how much is it? And when you say the price, it's amazing how you can talk to somebody and they can be really into what you're talking about. But then when you tell them the price, they're suddenly going, oh, well, let me think about it. Okay, and it turns it off. What you want to do is you never say the price all by itself. You always say the price, and that includes this and this and this, plus I'll do this and this and this. What you're doing is you're triggering the emotion sides of the brain as well as the right side, as well as the logical side of the brain. I'll give you an example with somebody says, Americans discard 2.5 million plastic bottles every hour. Wow, that sounds like a lot, doesn't it? What if I told you that's enough to reach the moon every 3 weeks? You hear? So we have to remember that when we tell people numbers, it triggers the logic side of the brain because the logic figures out numbers and everything else. But literally that can turn off the emotion side of the brain. So if we're trying to get somebody to buy and we throw too many numbers at it, we have statistics. People throw statistics at people all the time, and without realizing you're turning off the right side of the emotion side of the brain when you're doing that. Now, it doesn't mean they're not going to buy because a lot of people will buy, but a lot of people are, they hear statistics and the brain kind of goes off into a distance and it looks like they're listening, but they're not really listening.
Yeah. That's fascinating stuff. So tell me a little bit more about how people can, I guess, develop the ability to implement brain glue techniques.
Okay, so I want to give you an example and I want to show you how this works, okay? One of the first tools that is really powerful for people to consider is metaphor, okay? And I'll give you a way to solve this because I don't want to get confused, okay? And complete the phrase, my product or service is just like blank. And pick the craziest idea you can think of. In Brain Glue, naked is a trigger word. I work with Warren Buffett's team, and Warren Buffett has this. He loves those types of tools, and he would say, "Only when the tide goes out do you discover who's been swimming naked." What? Naked is a trigger word, okay? And what he's basically saying is, only when times get tough do you realize who's capable and who's competent. Okay, but so what he's saying is, naked, okay? He's using the word naked to grab your attention. Only when the tide goes out do you discover who's been swimming naked. So the brain goes, whoa, naked, huh? Oh, okay. Oh, and then suddenly you picture some guy in the water or whatever else. So a trigger word can really help. So complete the phrase, my product or service is just like what? So I could say brain glue. Brain glue it grabs attention just like a naked man running through your backyard. It's like, what? You see a naked man? What? Look at that guy. Okay, I'm using the word naked as a trigger word. but I'm completing the phrase. It's just like what? We ran a behavioral management firm. I had one of America's leading behavioral management firms working with major people and stuff like that, and big organizations. And we had difficulty explaining. We would say we could take your top people, you and your top people, and get you to tackle a bigger project than you ever tackled before, a bigger goal than you've ever tackled before. But as we describe it, it's so technical that people wouldn't understand what we were saying. So we're thinking, what else pushes people to do more than they would do normally? How about a personal trainer? Gets you to do push-ups. Come on, Dave. We get 3 more push-ups. Come on, 2 more push-ups. Come on. 1 more push. They push you. So we would say to a client or a prospect, so our process works. We're like a personal trainer, but for your mind. A personal trainer can. And it makes it easy for people to understand. If we can get you to do more push-ups by being a personal trainer, similarly, we can get you and your people to tackle bigger projects. And by saying it that way, it resonates with people. I'll give you a funny example. It's actually but it's so powerful when you say it's just like ... okay, and have fun with it. So Paul Tran invented an electric razor for man's private areas. I don't want to get too much into this, okay? But he wanted to come up with a name that would let people know what the product does, but it would not offend anybody. And so he's thinking about it. So it's just like a lawnmower. Why don't I call it the lawnmower? In fact, I think I'll call my company Manscaped. You can landscape the man with the lawnmower. And sales exploded. I remember having seen, I was in Bed Bath & Beyond or someplace with my wife, and they had a big poster, a white poster, and it said on it, the lawnmower, and it had an arrow, and it was pointing to the electric razor.
Yeah.
And there were 2 other guys that were standing there reading the text underneath it, and I went up and I started reading the text underneath it too, and it explained what it is. We would never have, most posters, you look at it, you don't read it, but this one is a lawnmower? And we went up and we started reading the text, and we went, oh, I see what this is. It grabbed our attention.
Yeah.
So I never bought the lawnmower. Okay, let me start there. Okay, if I bought it, I wouldn't share it with my friends. Okay, but I could see myself calling a friend and saying, "Hey, Joe, guess what I just bought? What? The lawnmower? The lawnmower where you have to mow your lawn? No, it's for shaving man's private areas." I could hear him laughing on the other end and calling his wife, "Hey, Mary, guess what James just bought? What? The lawnmower? Why? He has to mow his lawn? No, it's shaving his private areas." He came up with the phrase, it's just like, and he had fun with it and exaggerated it and came up with a tool. He actually used the name. We don't have to use the name, but it will get us thinking about what it's just like with our product or service. So that's a really great tool to start with. It's like, it's just like and have fun with it. The more fun you have with it, the more it triggers the emotion parts of the brain where decision-making happens. And you could sell like crazy. It's amazing how much money people make when they start applying this type of thing.
Yeah, that's a huge ask. When I framed the question, it was about these, we'll call them boring, mundane professional services that lead with logic and are all about logic and precision. So asking an accountant or a lawyer to have some fun with it and compare their service to something else, that may be a bit of a stretch. But let me ask you this as we're getting close to the end of the program here, James. Tips and advice that you would give the audience, some things that they can chew on today and maybe even begin to implement later on.
Well, definitely metaphor. Okay, you definitely want to start with metaphor, especially when you look at, men are from Mars, women are from Venus. Like, what? That's a metaphor. And yet he sold 50 million books because it triggers different parts of the brain. So that's a good place to start. Another one is make a list of the words that relate to your product or service, and then find words that rhyme with that. I like to say, switch your pitch if you want to get rich. Okay, because it helps with your pitch. Okay.
Yeah.
Then I said, brain glue lights the fire of desire in your buyer. So I just basically thought about it, and I said, well, it's desire. It boosts desire. So what rhymes with desire? Fire. Fire. Oh, wow. So light the fire of desire in your buyer. So come up, list of at least 3 words that relate to your product or service, and then look for all the words. You can go to online or however you want to do it, but find as many words as possible that rhyme with that. And often you can come up with a phrase that makes your product name or a description of what your product or service is sticky, so it sticks to their brain like glue. Do those sound good?
Yeah, love it, love it, love it. I think we can all do that immediately, if not sooner. James, we're out of time here, but before we bounce, I want you to tell the audience how they can contact you if they want to learn more about you, work with you, and where can they get the book?
So it's on Amazon. It's also in bookstores. If you go to yesbrainglue.com, then it's got lots of information on brain glue, and it's got links as far as that's concerned too. But it's got lots of tips and things from brain glue, so it kind of shows you how it's worked and how people use it. So yesbrainglue.com would be an easy way to do that.
That's great. James, thank you so much for being with us today on Behind the Numbers. We are out of time. We will certainly enjoy listening to this one over and over again.
Thank you very much, Dave. Dave Bookbinder, the finder of great growth of your business.
Close, but we'll work on that. Maybe we'll do that offline. But as James Bond just said, I am Dave Bookbinder, and I'm known for helping my clients and valuing their businesses. I can't thank you all enough for watching and listening to this program. We really appreciate your support. If you like what you heard here today, please tell somebody about the show and maybe even hit the share button. That's all we have for today, folks. We'll see you next time on Behind the Numbers. Take care.